on this computer. Hi, and welcome to Agile Expertise, the fun meetup group where we all bring some of the best speakers to the table for your learning. I'm Sital, and I am the founder of Agile World. And today we actually have our host, Giles Lindsay, who's a very good friend of mine, but also the CEO of Agile Delta. And not only the CEO of that, but he's also the CTO of Agile World and spends a lot of time with us working on various projects and missions that we are trying to accomplish for next year and this year. At the moment, he's currently running a transformation for BMJ, the British Medical Journal. And he's also the president of the BAI, which is the Business Agility Institute, which is a chapter, should I say, which is something that's currently being put underway for the UK, which is a really exciting thing that Giles is involved in. Not only that, he's also an advisory for the council with the PMI group as well. So Giles is a very busy bee, but we'd like to thank him for the time that he gives us as well in this meetup space. He really does. He's very dedicated to us and has got lots to share. And without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Giles and put you in spotlight view.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Chantal, for that. That is absolutely brilliant. I'm still doing my duty of letting people in as well, which is awesome. Look, thank you very much. Thank you for the welcome. I'm going to go straight into sharing my screen. So hopefully you will please let me know if you can see my screen. Great, fantastic. All right, well, look, great. Thank you very much. And Chantal, thank you for such an amazing welcome. As ever, working with you, it's just always awesome. So it's great to be here. And I'm going to start, as I mean to go on, with a quick intro. Now, today's talk is a personal reflection and a personal journey as well, right? And it stems from my own personal experiences, my own personal successes, my own personal failures, leading Agile adoptions over the last 10 plus years or so. And I'm going to be highlighting specific common challenges or dysfunctions, which somehow still create the most amount of friction with our jobs daily when trying to create an environment which allows genuine Agile to actually succeed in the organization, and which needs resolving today before actually Agile can even evolve further. And as I'm going to mention often, the Agile Manifesto has been around for nearly 20 years, as we know, especially with the anniversary coming up in February next year. And yet we are still experiencing issues with Agile ways of working that we were facing back in 2010 or even earlier. Now, Agile in 2030 is going to be no different from now, unless we resolve some of these challenges that impede me, have the friction for myself, first of all. So the purpose of tonight's talk is to get us all to think whether what we're doing in our organizations is genuine Agile, or whether it is simply Agile theatre. Now, before we start talking about the 9 dysfunctions, I actually want to talk about the definition of dysfunction and actually why I chose that specific term for today's talk. The definition of dysfunction is used to describe behaviours which are different from what is considered normal or ideal. And it's these non-ideal, non-agile behaviours that we definitely need to become more normal and ideal for genuine organizational agility to actually flourish and to be as successful as possible in our organizations, in the workplace, not only for the remainder of 2020, but for 2021 and beyond. Now, I also want to share some synonyms for dysfunction, which I also think are great ways of describing what's going on in some of our organizations. I think there's some great words and terms here that describe exactly some of the Agile issues we face in our organizations today. Malfunction, failure, poorly functioning, improper operation, disorder, train wreck, misoperation, anarchy, disorganization, disarray. I mean, the list goes on. One of my favorites at the very end, chaos. You know, I genuinely believe that these are in the Oxford Dictionary as the main synonyms for the word dysfunction. So this leads nicely onto the dysfunctions themselves. And as I often do at webinars, meetups, conferences, on those topics I'm passionate about, I like to share those most common, most experienced, and possibly the biggest dysfunctions or mistakes that are made that I see or face most often in my career, that are those limitations or blockers for me in my quest for genuine agility and enabling agility the best way possible throughout an organization for the future. Now, I'm not necessarily providing solutions for these, but I'm going to share and highlight the top 9 persisting challenges for me and some of the things that we can do to actually limit them. And you're going to see they do follow a well-trodden path of recurring patterns. And once highlighted and shared, these then become opportunities for us all as these thought leaders, as these agile leaders in our organizations and professional agile communities to help overcome them, to allow the future of agile to be as successful as possible. And I'm going to explain about that more at the end of the talk. Now, I hope none of the things I'm going to talk about genuinely are new to any of the agile leaders and coaches here today. But I bet a lot of you have suffered from some or all of these at some point. You might currently be experiencing them. So dysfunction number 1, being agile in name only isn't genuine. Now, the term agile is often applied to organizations or parts of that actually have no substantive claim to any kind of agility whatsoever. This usage wrongly leads to many organizations being called agile, even though they are still managed through traditional bureaucracy without any true agile leadership. Now, this over-eagerness to self-identify as agile has created that fake agile or agile theatre, as I mentioned at the start, among organizations that misunderstand or simply choose to ignore that true application of agility in our organizations. And as I think we all appreciate, to understand whether an organization is truly agile, you've got to look beyond what they are simply saying. You have to look at how they are actually operating. Now, some of the most successful organizations that have implemented an agile way of working don't even use the standard terminology of agile or worry about calling themselves agile at all. This is also known as agile without the label. So, of course, their business agility, that organizational agility, coupled with the leadership we know they all have, is a really fundamental reason why they've become the most valuable organizations in the world today. The uncomplimentary phrase, agile in name only, or I know, applies to organizations that have usually too narrow a focus. They're only implementing parts of the agile process while ignoring leadership, culture, structures, and governance, and also without embracing the agile philosophy and values, which are shared and embodied by our agile leaders and coaches in our organizations. Now, to avoid uncomfortable scrutiny, some organizations even cover themselves in agile camouflage, borrowing the ceremonies and vernacular of agile methods and frameworks that we all use daily without fundamentally changing their underlying work habits or having the correct leaders in place to change this. Ultimately, these organizations are simply doing agile without truly being agile. And there is often a lack of commitment seemingly throughout that same organization. They don't understand why the change is happening and are not committing to what is necessary to actually achieve it. As I mentioned earlier, this claim by organizations calling themselves agile can never be genuine if they do not have the right leadership, sharing that agile philosophy and set of values, enabling the required change and evolution within the organization. To be truly agile, an organization today needs to operate in a very different way, with leadership, values, norms, all reinforcing that agile philosophy and culture. Now, if you're an agile leader coming into an organization that is resisting change and operating by doing agile in name only, This is a substantial hurdle to overcome. Some might say it's impossible. Dysfunction number 2, adopting Agile for software teams isn't genuine. The Agile Manifesto and corresponding principles were originally written for the context of software development and was intended to address issues that the software teams faced back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Now look, the fact that the wording of the manifesto still today in 2020 is limited to software development, I mean, it seriously is less than adequate as a definition of organizational agility now and for the future. So of course, we all have an appreciation that there is a real need for that manifesto definition to evolve further. And when agile processes are introduced, and some might even say at times forced upon software teams in those traditionally managed organizations, without the right coaching, leadership, etc., they inevitably run into conflict with other parts of that business that have much more bureaucracy and are less flexible to change. Organizations will still be behaving in exactly the same way in 2030 unless we work together to bring about a major change to that organization design, that system thinking, that design thinking, and those current ways of working. Because the current and most widely shared definition of Agile is all about software development, senior management often become confused asking, isn't it just for software only? Now, as I've personally experienced far too often in my career, these non-agile leaders of an organization somehow undergoing a change, an evolution, a transformation, whatever you and your organization want to call it, think all that's involved is the software teams learning a new framework, a myopic view. And as that technology and agile leader, I've had to coach many senior managers and executives on Agile Foundation courses to help them understand what actually it is all about. So, understanding the Agile philosophy, being able to manifest those Agile values at all business levels throughout the organization is critical for the leader to help build and grow a truly Agile organization, not just now, but for that long-term future as well. Now, in arriving at this kind of software-only perception, without the right leadership and philosophy in place, Agile often ends up as just a couple of pieces of the process sort of hashed together. We've all seen it. Maybe simply some sprints for development purposes, okay? And especially with no adoption within the rest of the organization. Now, this often intensifies the idea that Agile is actually just the coding part, which senior managers believe don't obviously require other elements, departments, and actors involved in that overall process. This again creates a version of that fake Agile I was talking about at the start within the same organization, and actually limits the idea that Agile actually refers to the ability of that organization to rapidly respond to change and continuously improve and learn. As we all know, coding is a relatively small part of the overall delivery process. So it's not surprising then that the perception of just making the coding part agile with no engagement with the rest of the business makes it run into conflict, especially if the rest of the organization is still working in an old way with those old business processes and that old business bureaucracy and micromanagement. Excuse me. Genuine organizational agility should not only be restricted to software development, but instead it should be focused across the whole organization to achieve successful business outcomes. Now look, please note, Agile, especially for software teams only, is not the goal. Dysfunction number 3, obsessing over scaling isn't genuine. As we all know, right, The industry term scaling in the context of Agile is all about how we can ideally scale Agile principles and those practices to support the enterprise and address the specific challenges of managing a larger number of Agile teams, but while continuing to deliver on the promises of Agile values and norms. Now, this is essentially enterprise Agile that's focused on adoption within those larger scale environments and organizations. However, scaling across that large enterprise is not scaling more of the same. There is no cookie cutter pattern for us to actually use to do this. Scaling across a large heterogeneous enterprise is actually about breadth, diversity, and complexity. Now look, often organizational leadership somehow obsess about scaling up Agile, as this is some sort of organizational goal to achieve. But at the same time, Agile teams often cite that same leadership and existing culture as actually the greatest barrier to successfully scaling Agile the right way within the organization. On top of this, some of the current efforts to scale Agile seem to be trying to shoehorn the horizontal ideology of Agile into still those vertical management structures. And these scaling methods simply can't work for very long. In the process, they run the risk of degrading and destroying everything in Agile that is actually authentic and useful. All that remains will be the empty phrases and labels of Agile, just not the reality. Now, we will actually end up in an unproductive vertical world of hierarchical bureaucracy yet again, if we are not careful. Now, obviously, you can see why such an approach would be popular with traditional management, because it actually saves them the trouble of having to make any changes. Amazing! And the approach preserves and supports the existing management top-down ideology. And some would say as well as those executives' extravagant bonuses for maintaining it. So a fundamental issue here is that if the organization is thinking about scaling up Agile, it's actually already on the wrong track. The challenge of genuine business agility is how to descale those big, monolithic, internally focused systems and those bureaucratic business processes as well into smaller, value-focused tasks and outcomes that could be run by those agile customer value-focused teams wherever they are in the organization, not just in the software world. Another perspective in support of this genuine business agility is that it's about a way of being and does not require specific practices to supposedly make it scale. And of course, we've heard of Dan North. A few years ago, he started talking about swarming, scaling without a religious methodology, which actually maps back to this idea perfectly. As such, there is no safe journey when scaling. Ultimately, scaling means developing organizational agility by looking for opportunities to change the organizational design, changing the skills required to deliver successfully, and also changing the behaviors of those working in the teams. Scaling Agile within top-down control organization only reinforces organizational silos and keeps the same organization actually stuck in the past. Now, I've seen very recently at a previous organization subscribe to this belief with senior-ish management in the guise of a head of product who had little agile guidance, reattempting, I'm not necessarily sure that's a true English word, to scale agile when it was already happening in the organization by simply copying and pasting agile teams and structures actually in that cookie cutter fashion, rather than having the right teams aligned to the right value streams, delivering true customer value. And as I said earlier, it's not about scaling more of the same. Companies that successfully scale Agile the right way will see major changes in their business and are better able to read changing conditions and priorities, develop adaptive solutions, and avoid the constant crises that so frequently hit traditional hierarchies. John Smart recently wrote-ish in a blog post titled, "Want to scale Agile? Don't. Descale the work first. Achieve big through small." Dysfunction number 4, submitting to the command and control gang isn't genuine. What's annoying about agile to control-minded management at any level within an organization, but especially prevalent with senior or middle management in my own personal experience, is that it recognizes a very big problem lies within control itself, especially when this gang worships at the altar of conformance and are not able to adapt and change. This same group seem to have the loudest voices, but actually lack the authority to make the necessary structural changes and are given misaligned incentives leading to those traditional behaviors to resurface within our organization. Reconciling agile execution and innovation lies in giving greater freedom to those actually doing the work, being able to exercise their talents and creativity, but doing so within short cycles so that they themselves can see whether they're actually making the progress or not. Now, even worse for hierarchical control, agile leadership thrives on transparency. So, one of the dirty, not so little secrets of traditional middle management is that control thrives on non-transparency, especially when they continually follow the ideology of controllism from the top down. So introducing things like the true agile leadership means exposing all those non-transparent tricks that hierarchical managers play on their subordinates to maintain power. Is it any wonder then that agile isn't naturally popular with the command and control gang, and as such will not succeed if they do not allow it to flourish within the organization? There have been many well-documented situations, like you just go and Google it, right, where an agile transformation or evolution didn't deliver the expected improvements, or even failed and was ultimately stopped because of the involvement of this gang. Those who don't pliantly follow this group become an obstacle in their mind and not a benefit. With such defenders of controlism, who needs enemies, some might say? And when advocating a new approach or a new way of working, it is actually natural to openly highlight the flaws of the current ways of doing things. If everything were perfect, why should people listen to us? Now, this is actually where the biggest friction comes from. Agile leaders and coaches have actually suggested many ways to deal with organizations that have a command and control management style. For example, by assessing if an organization is truly ready or not for Agile in the first place, before even thinking about whether there's a future for it or not. Now, these leaders also need to be wary of the damage from anti-Agile propaganda from this group, which will also limit the success of any adoption within any of our organizations. If an organization genuinely wants Agile and its leadership to succeed, then the hardest lesson for this command and control gang is learning to trust the Agile leaders and the talented people within our teams, then recognizing when to get out of their way. It's down to us all to help guide and coach the best way possible, to allow this to happen and to help remove that resistance to change. Dysfunction number 5, fixating on brands, you can see where this is going, isn't genuine. Now, today, here, 3rd of December, 2020, within the Agile world, there is a sense of various Agile brands being promoted by companies, consultants, or trainers, of which, as we can see from the map that Christopher Webb created for Deloitte, the Agile landscape, there are over 40 variants and 70 Agile practices that we can see. These are all multiple variants of the same underlying idea of, drumroll please everyone, Agile. Who'd have thought? Yeah, crazy. And these Agile brands and variants are attractive because they are actually sold as simplified solutions to difficult project and process management problems that organizations may be currently facing. As such, an emphasis on any particular variant of Agile as the answer for this And then the insistence on using the particular branded labels, processes, and terminology tend to take away from the actual principle of Agile as essentially a different way of working, not simply the products or wares of a particular company. These multiple forms of branded Agile are at times confusing and can lead to the impression that Agile itself may be confused, which causes even further friction, especially for senior management. Branded Agile variants include many that are genuine, but there are those that are fake as well, because they truly don't uphold the philosophy of Agile. A major caveat here that I and colleagues have learned, especially the hard way. Beware of companies, consultants, and trainers with those little black books who insist that their branded or personal version of Agile is the one and only true way, which will not actually allow that genuine agility to flourish and evolve within the organization, regardless of how it is actually implemented. Dysfunction number 6, replicating a way of working isn't genuine. Who thought? Many companies today are now aspiring to actually create their own internal agile approaches based on evolving their existing ones they're currently working with. Now, this is absolutely great. The leaders of mainstream agile organizations like Scrum Alliance, like Disciplined Agile, are openly advocating that this evolution is what all companies should be aspiring towards. Move away from saying an organization is following a branded Agile framework towards an understanding that Agile is that different way of running an organization with its own unique way of working. The leaders at these institutes recommend that you do not aspire to be Spotify, but rather be like Spotify in creating your own way of working. Start with a basic Agile method, the recipe here, then spice it up with the help of proven strategies from many Agile toolkits, frameworks that we all know about, the ingredients. Become your own Spotify, not somebody else's. Now, I hope we all agree, it's a great idea to learn from others, to get inspiration. We do it all the time, but not to copy. You can and always should do better than simply just copying someone else's solution or methodology in creating your own way of working for your own organizations. Teams and organizations need to take ownership of their agile processes, not buy one or simply implement something generic that will not work for the organization as a whole and cannot be thought of as genuine ever. Create an organizational culture that supports trust, innovation, autonomy, experimentation, with little bureaucracy for that genuine agility to actually succeed. Now, great quote from Dave Snowden. You can't start at the end of someone else's journey. You've got to live an equivalent journey of your own. So, if you are copying Spotify model, ask yourself, are you a music streaming company based in Sweden? Just saying. Dysfunction number 7, enduring organizational friction, isn't genuine. IT as a metaphor is often compared to that of a car. I've seen it so many times in my 25, 26-year career. High-performing teams in organizations are actually described often as a Ferrari. Now, I know this firsthand. Seeing those unmotivated and uninspired teams previously described as lethargic in an organization by other senior managers, in some ways, some would say like those of a backstreet garage owner sat in a deck chair with a hanky on his head, not wanting to do any car that's up on a ramp with oil dripping out of it, actually being transformed into that Formula One team working so well in tune together with those 16 people around the car, taking wheels on and off it in under 2.5 seconds. Incredible. However, there is no point in tuning that Ferrari or F1 car if it's going to be stuck in traffic. It's not going to go any faster than the Ford Fiesta. Traffic and blockers in front of the Ferrari need to be moved out of the way for it to ultimately perform. And there's no space to support these high-performing teams with these organizational impediments still surrounding them. Your way of working should aim to resolve this friction rather than simply enduring it, allowing teams to deliver the best way they can by working with and coaching those other departments and teams within the organization that need to have an appreciation and awareness of those agile ways of working, that true organizational agility. Now, do not think for 1 second that this friction can simply be ignored or sidestepped in achieving genuine organizational or that business agility. This has caught myself out and colleagues more than anything else on our personal journeys. Dysfunction number 8, accepting bureaucratic senior leadership or management isn't genuine. Now, one thing hasn't changed with the popularity of Agile. There is still loads of pressure from the top down. Got to be honest, it's always there. But I hope you agree with this, and I personally believe that in an ideal organization, the C-levels should, and someone might even have to say, if not must, transform and promote the agile changes too. And I've worked with some amazing technology leaders in my career and mentors who've done exactly this. And I'm sure there's loads of people here who've got those similar people in mind too. But I've also worked with those C-levels who haven't supported and promoted the changes, believing somehow they know better, when clearly they didn't. In many companies I and Agile colleagues have worked in, it's still often not the case today, where they revert back to the only processes and behaviours they know, believing that somehow they understand how to deliver better than the leaders and the teams who actually deliver the outcomes daily. This agile leadership is going to be stuck in a perpetual loop and is not going to be allowed to evolve if we continue to experience this resistance and friction from the top down. Now, one author, Gary Hamel, gave a vivid description of bureaucracy and this kind of top-down pressure in a front-page Harvard Business Review article titled "Bureaucracy Must Die," that summed it up as strategy gets set at the top, power trickles down. Big leaders appoint little leaders. Individuals compete for promotion. Compensation correlates with rank. Tasks are assigned. Managers assess performance. Rules tightly circumscribe discretion. And as such, these same executives are still focusing on snapping their fingers, trying to become agile magically, the agile Harry Potter syndrome, often without any care or understanding the true why, hoping for a faster time to market possibly, which ultimately never comes to them or anyone else, or simply wanting to choose to ignore it altogether. Now, as I've experienced, certainly over the last 10 years, there are some in senior management circles, please note, I'm not calling them senior leadership here, that don't understand what agile actually is, and sometimes don't even want to understand. I recently had a rather ignorant line manager as a CIO who used to say of the agile ways of working to others, "What is that agile thing you do?" Even if I told him 20 times a week. Now, strangely, I once got an apology from the people we were actually talking to in a large meeting after he said it and simply just turned and walked away. Needless to say, less than 6 months later, actually, he was no longer the CIO. And I've recently worked with an exco that were so disconnected simply due to bureaucracy being the company culture when I arrived. So This same group sometimes mistakenly think Agile is some new kind of anti-bureaucracy, some kind of voodoo, which I've had it called by 3 different senior managers, associating it with a lack of control or management, if you like, this chaotic free-for-all where there is no plan, which for them leads to a lack of a coherent, coordinated approach across the organization, i.e. no clear view of the changes which together lead to those desired outcomes we want for the organization. Or possibly through an element of fear, they believe they're going to lose control of the products and not be able to make changes to them as and when they see fit. Senior management often experiences friction with new agile ways of working, often due to a lack of the education given of the journey being taken, even if they're the ones who've mandated the change in the first place, or a lack of coaching to understand the why, or a lack of trust of the people who are responsible to deliver, or even simply due to a general resistance to change, wrongly thinking it's going to cost too much to implement, or losing sight of the real goal, which is achieving successful business outcomes, not simply doing agile as some sort of tick in a box exercise to say now the company is agile. Big reveal moment now, please, drum roll everybody. It's not all their fault. A fundamental issue for senior management is that the standard agile vocabulary, born from the foundations of agile with frameworks like Scrum, were devised purposefully to be unattractive to this same management group. I personally understand why that happened, but do not understand why it hasn't since evolved. One thing agile leaders and coaches have to be very mindful of is that these same frameworks have offered little or zero guidance to those people who actually have to change the most. We as an agile community at times seem to have completely missed the fact that the people who need the most coaching, guidance and support are those senior managers who are actually in charge. Now, it seems crazy to believe, but I've only seen this being openly discussed within the last few years. Yet we've been working in agile ways for nearly 20 years. I don't know, did we all hope this friction would somehow simply magically disappear? Or were we, including myself, somehow wearing blinkers the whole time? Now, a lot of senior managers I know aren't actually actively fighting agile. They simply haven't understood how it applies to their roles or how to perform those roles in ways that actually enhance that genuine agility. Because of a lack of support and education for this group, iterative change has become so fast with our agile ways of working that big hierarchical bureaucracies cannot cope. And in turn, that means senior management cannot cope with the pace of agile either. Somehow sending commands up and down the management ladder is too slow and cumbersome and causes further friction if not managed properly by the agile leaders and coaches. If organizations are not careful, these new agile ways of working can wrongly become re-diverted into yet another company reorganization, driven by the same senior management wanting to get that control back over what is happening in the organization, creating even further change fatigue and making it less likely to succeed. Now, I've heard of people talk of the soul of a department being ripped out with changes like this, especially when the agile leaders are let go. This invariably wrongly leads to a negative way of organizing, that woo, instead of a positive way of working, that wow, and will create even further friction within an agile adoption and make it far less likely to succeed. If I'm a betting man and could see the future, I'd be able to make a ton of money on the fact that in 2030, organizations will still be operating the same way, as norms and ways of working will not have evolved if we are not making a difference with this change right now. Great cartoon. I think it sums it up. Who wants change? Who wants to change? However, Mark Buchan, who's big in the agility leadership space, recently created this version. Who wants change? Who's willing to change? Who's capable of change? Much better. The Business Agility Report 2019 preface states, "The report is a sobering account of the obstacles along the way, particularly in larger organizations that suffer from risk-averse cultures, organizational silos, bureaucratic layers, workforce passivity, traditional mindsets, and above all, lack of strongly supportive leadership at the top." The hard truth today is that agile and traditional bureaucratic management still don't get along, and we all need to work harder to help change this. In repeated polls of people working in many different organizations where agile is being implemented, somewhere on average between 70, 90 to 90% reported tension between the way the agile teams are run and the way the rest of the organization is managed. Agile leadership throughout an organization is a lot harder than traditional leadership. If you're doing it right, you care a whole lot more. Often these agile leaders are the filter between harsh top-level objectives and truly trying to motivate their teams, making a difference and enabling those successful deliveries. Agile leaders must help organizations and senior managers understand that it's not a new level of anti-bureaucracy and that they're not going to lose control of their products, and understand that they need to help coach the senior management team to understand what it is they are committing to, which I believe is a quote from Deming. They must also ensure they're providing the guidance required and advising the senior managers of the approaches being taken by the teams, bringing them on the same journey. And finally, they need to be part of the success criteria to help senior managers become senior leaders. An agile leader is by necessity someone who lives and models this agile mindset, that person who is pragmatic, knowledgeable, flexible, open, respectful and responsive, not prescriptive and bureaucratic. So this leads nicely on to our last dysfunction. Having a fixed or traditional mindset isn't genuine. As discussed earlier, organizations that are very agile often shy away from the label agile, or are moving away from a particular brand and are using their own homegrown words, which actually feels more genuine. The difference between those organizations that can claim to be genuinely agile and those that can't is, for a large part, down to those adopting the agile mindset at its core, from its people and culture to its structure and technology, i.e. being agile, not simply doing agile. Those leaders that adapt to the continuum of agile are going to see those improvements over time, versus those leaders that don't adapt due to that fixed mindset, where they go through the motions of somehow just doing agile because of some wider company directive. If this mindset adoption doesn't happen, then that organizational culture is never going to improve, even if senior management somehow thinks that, it's going to be just fine the way it is. As some people in organizations wrongly believe, an agile mindset does not simply see things in that polarized view, i.e. agile or not. An agile mindset is that set of attitudes that support a truly agile working environment. And this mindset is necessary for agile leaders to cultivate those high-performing teams who in turn deliver amazing value for our customers internally and externally. This mindset is also independent of terminology, labels, specific proprietary processes, particular agile brands, and helps with fixing the perception of whether that organization can truly claim to be agile or not. Now, if this mindset is cultivated by the leaders and nourished, the teams will experience amazing outcomes. Happy employees delivering great value and great results. So agile is all about embracing that different mindset or philosophy. Agile is not a system, not a methodology, not a platform, and not an organizational structure. In my experience, when people and organizations have the right leaders and mindset, it hardly matters what tools, processes, and practices they are using. It makes things come out right. And conversely, if they don't have the right leaders and mindset, you know what? It doesn't matter if they're implementing absolutely every tool, process, practice, and procedure exactly according to the book. No benefits are going to flow. And again, I've probably experienced this more often than not throughout my career. The agile mindset is the environment within which teams truly flourish and can claim genuine agility. If we want Agile to succeed in 2020 and beyond, we need to be collaborative, evolve, and overcome these 9 dysfunctions, or my 9 dysfunctions that I've mentioned here today, in the present as a priority, along with no doubt many others that you all may be suffering from as well. And I look forward to hearing about what some of those may be at the end in the discussion. So finally, that journey for genuine business agility. If you've decided you want to become an agile organization, you're embarking on a journey to deliver value to your customers quickly and continuously. There is no one-size-fits-all process at the start of this journey on how to achieve it, or how it's simply going to somehow reduce cost from the outset as a goal from senior management. It's also something that cannot be implemented overnight, especially across an entire organization or enterprise. There are many factors, some that have been discussed already, that need addressing first of all to make a success of this journey. There is not a set path, as we can see in the photo, and the outcomes differ for all organizations. It's not about adopting a model or framework that works for someone or somewhere else, or being forced to change your approach and journey halfway through, especially when the maturity of an engineering product, program, or delivery or coaching capability or department is already being proven. Always focus on the reason why you're doing this journey. It's not about creating or even simplifying a nice organizational chart somehow for senior management. Your organization is not the goal. It is that means to an end. And if you lose track of that goal, no organizational model is going to help you achieve the transformation or those right business outcomes in helping create value to customers quickly and continuously. As I've already mentioned many times today, Agile is that embraced philosophy and set of values brought about by having the right Agile leaders and ways of working, supporting the people and culture. It isn't just a methodology to somehow implement within an existing management framework. It's all about working smarter rather than harder. It's not about doing more work in less time, or as some people myopically wrongly believe, doing twice the work in half the time. It's about generating more value and better outcomes with less work. You don't do Agile if you simply want the benefits. You have to be Agile. When you have the right Agile leaders and coaches, the teams deliver within a business model that generates value for the whole organization as well as the customers. And as Agile leaders, our goal should not just be about implementing Agile. Our goal instead is enabling successful business outcomes. Ultimately, this way of working and approach sets up that organization to now be able to say it is genuinely being Agile. So, parting thoughts. Forget about whether you're scaling or not, whether you need to say you're following a particular brand to make a success of that adoption or transformation. Box ticking to make the organization be thought of as doing Agile, satisfying incorrect management, control, or bureaucracy. Instead, think about the outcomes from why you are doing this, evolving your Agile approach to fit your organization, creating a way of working that works for the whole company, and becoming that focused agile environment that delights customers. Enjoy the evolution. So my wrap up. As I mentioned at the start, the aim of tonight was not necessarily to provide full-blown solutions and answers to my personal dysfunctions, but to share these for genuine business agility, which then become, I suppose, a catalyst and opportunities for us all as this truly amazing agile community that we've become to solve together, especially if they are still being pervasive in our organizations today. So this leads very nicely onto my last slide. Final question, and have your say. What is genuine agile for you, and what are your agile challenges getting there? On screen, you're going to see a QR code and a short URL, and you can use your camera on your phone to get you there, where you can answer this and a couple of other questions too. The outcome of this research is going to be a report of those big challenges that are still affecting the implementations of genuine business agility within our organizations nearly 20 years on since the launch of the Agile Manifesto, and what we all need to do to resolve them. Now, it's going to be published in a white paper in early 2021, hopefully somewhere around the 20th anniversary. And I hope I'm going to be able to come back at a future event and actually share the findings from this, leading on to further workshops, projects, collaborations on overcoming many of these challenges through Agile champions helping to provide and share answers and solutions for them, and allowing these ways of working, or WOWs, to simply become that commonplace way of working in organizations over the next decade, enabling greater business agility and that responsible leadership to be successful. Thanks everyone for coming to my talk today. And I will stick it back onto the QR code and the short URL for those that want it. Thank you very much. Chantal, back to you.
Thank you, Giles. That was brilliant. Thank you. Just going to switch to gallery mode, take you off spotlight.
I'll give it another minute or so, and then I'll come off sharing screen, and then we can obviously all see one another and have a great chat.
Yeah, that was really good, Giles. Really insightful, and I think really enjoyed the 9 dysfunctions. And I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned that there's a need for the manifesto to upgrade and evolve a little bit, but we need to be mindful that it's got to be in the right hands as well when you do go through such an evolution. It might be risky in the traditional leaders' hands, should I say. We have had a few questions, so I'm just going to bring them up.
Right, well, I will stop my share now because I know you've also shared the URL in the chat window as well, but it'd be great if people want to ask questions either in person or go through them in the chat.
Yeah, so the first comment came from Femi, and his question was 2030. Lol, I hope that we have made progress by then. Should that be in the list?
Yeah, and I mean, all of these are probably, I could have actually called these the 9 anti-patterns, my own person, these are things which have impacted me. Now, I genuinely believe with very little effort, everybody here tonight could probably put their top 9 things together and actually create their own talks and be able to go around and share these and everything else, and share I suppose the passion and frustration behind them as well that I did this evening. But yeah, Femi, as you know, someone I look up to and learn from. Yeah, anti-patterns is certainly a great word. So thanks for sharing that one.
Yeah, and then we've got, so I'm just kind of scrolling through to people who are still in the room as well. So we have Matthew Hutton, who made a comment to say that my company started with number 2 and has become less like that over time. Matthew, did you want to share anything more about that?
Yeah, so I think we started with Agile when it was like just my team really. And then we sort of like expanded it to the whole of IT, and then we got some of the projecty people on board. And yeah, that's probably roughly where we are at the moment. And then there's a bit of input from some of the rest of the business, but that's probably roughly where we are. And like the thing that annoys me most is like when we go and do a change and then it sits for 6 months waiting for UAT from someone in the business to go and look at it. We have some old technology that's harder to do source control on and stuff, so that's very, very annoying when people do things like that, because it's like you wanted it and then you're going to wait like a year to kind of go and spend
do you
2 hours
think
looking
you
at it.
suffer any more than just number 2?
Oh, probably, yeah. Senior management as well, I think, probably.
I see. And guess what? These are just, I think these are atypical. I could call these probably the 9 atypical dysfunctions in organizations. I don't think they have to be actually, I call them out. But I mean, for me, these are the things that have most, when I've gone back through my notes, and believe you me, anybody that knows me, I'm a prolific post-it note writer, and I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and I write them all up as notes. But if I actually go back and look after the stuff I've done over the last 10 years, I actually come across these 9 more often than not anywhere else. So, Matthew, thanks for that. And I do hope that you can be possibly part of this journey with the rest of us to actually find ways as how we're going to overcome these dysfunctions, right? I want to learn from everybody by obviously sharing that QR code, that URL that's in the chat window. I want people to fill it in. I need to get an awareness of these things. I can then actually collate the data, create the analytics from this, come back, present the findings, and then actually, in fact, we can start little projects off to find unique ways and circumstances, how we evolve that way of thinking, that potentially a bit of fixed mindset or whatever it is, and how we help organizations change. I mean, I'd love to be able to come along with the baseball bat and just, have a conversation that way. But I know it doesn't work very well or too often, Who knows?
Not sure that will go down so well, Giles. Another comment from Femi. I think this is more of a thought process as we were going through the talk. He was like, but then we have a framework that derives its revenue on encouraging organizations to scale up and building of complex dual operating system. Femi, do you want to expand?
Well, that it says it all, to be quite honest. There's a particular approach. I was going to call it a framework, but I'd just use the word approach, that is so bloated and so multi-layered and so impractical that, it's a money-making machine, in my opinion. And it gives the impression that it's a silver bullet, that it's got an answer to every possible scenario. And unfortunately, enterprises are buying it.
Yeah, that's the sad truth, isn't it? So, a lot of people are commoditizing on it as well and saying, oh, we've got a framework, buy our work through story points. I think I've seen that so many times, and it's like it's driven me up the wall. So they charge by story points. Can you believe it? I don't know if you've seen that. Crazy.
But Femi, I'm there with you. I'm there in agreeing with you 100%, sir. So as ever, thank you for sharing. What's great, we've got Marcus back from his VP as well. He's back with us.
And he's going to tell us stories about pasted spreadsheet into PowerPoint.
Guys, it's amazing, but yeah, the interesting things we are. It's a big transition period. We're getting a new CIO, and he's coming from a heavily technical background. So hopefully someone will be able to read data as it's meant to be read instead of a PowerPoint. So
nice.
that's the hope. But yeah, my meeting ended first. So, and it's the frustration part is like because they cannot see data as it comes and they do not understand what is this showing about the organization, that are they working where they should be working to bring value. The concept of value is the worst part to give them. They're the ones who are paying for it, but they do not want to understand value. Does that make sense?
Yes, because it's another one of those dysfunctions. It's another one, let's use Femi's word, it's another one of those anti-patterns. So yeah, absolutely, 100%.
and it became the reverse became, if you look at we go back to the Middle Ages, right? A fiefdom, the more vassal states you have, the more powerful you are. And they operate, I mean, exactly the same way. The more heads they have in the department, the more powerful they are. But to keep those heads, they had to find work for them.
Yeah.
So now they are finding work for the heads they have. They are not doing work that is valuable with the resources they don't need. So if they manufacture work that does not add value, it's just busy work. So.
That sounds like noise.
There's what, Marcus? Meetings.
Oh my God.
Meetings are a best way of disguising non-work.
Yep.
You know, people just fill up their diary with meetings, and then you try and talk to them, and then they tell you that, sorry, I'm too busy. I've got meetings all day.
So true.
Is it urgent?
Are you in my company? Are you working? Because it sounds exactly like you were here. This is exactly our directors. They are busy being busy. They go from meeting to meeting. Oh, I have to drop off now because I have to. But the work I'm doing is really pure agile. Basically, if you, Mr. Director, or you don't do your work, all of this will appear on the board as not done. And because there's no mechanism in agile for them to delegate, they need to do, then of course it all collapses, and it's giving visibility to what they are not doing actually. And it's exposing the problem. The teams cannot make business decisions because they are insulated from the business unit, number one. So you have the director who does all the negotiation with business, but does not transfer to the team that knowledge. They give orders to the team to do this. So if you're giving an order to do something and you are not part of the conversation, remember, you create the card and you have the conversation and the acceptance criteria, the conversation is not there. How are you going to make a self-managing team decision when it comes to, should I do this way or that way? I don't know, I have to wait. I haven't been told. Then you cross your arms and you see. All there.
So just moving over to Nikki. So Nikki had a very important question to ask, and that was, could you please share the link to the article you mentioned? I think it was between Dysfunction 3 and 4.
Nikki, is there a particular, which one? I mean, I mentioned the Harvard Business Review one, and I mentioned the Business Agility Institute one.
I didn't have time to scribble down because I was like, oh, I was writing down.
Guess what? I'll share both. We'll put them in the chat in the meetup afterwards, and I'll put links to both of them in there for you.
Yeah, thanks a million.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We'll go to one last one, and then we can open up questions on the floor as well. Oh God, someone just went the wrong way. Okay, excuse me. Sorry. This is a question from Ashley. When we practice agnostic agile, are we assuming the user knows all of these 40 to 70 variants of agile, or just the core, i.e. Scrum, Kanban, XP, etc.? What exactly does the agnostic agile practice encompass, or is that another one to add to the list of variants?
Ash, hello. Good to see you.
Hello. I feel like that's more one for the confessional, but when you put the tube map up, I just thought I had to sense check. Have I gotten it wrong for the last, years and years?
Guess what? When it's your turn on the confessional, you can come and confess to what. Do you know what? I don't have the answer, and I'm always the first person to say I don't know, right? I mean, Jesus. I know Christmas wasn't, no pun intended. I don't know. Genuinely, does anybody really know all 40 to 70 different variants and practices of Agile? I mean,
I got lost at crystal clear.
Femi's got his hand up, of course.
I do. Ashley, I do.
That's brilliant. So what we now need.
Do you want me to quickly tell you what it is?
Yeah, please.
It's a 4-letter word. And it's DONE. It's just done.
Done. Yes.
It's as simple as that. Done. It's become so absolutely ridiculous now.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
commercialization, it's profitability. And guess what? We fuel this. We as consultants, we as practitioners, we fuel this. We come in and we bamboozle people with terminologies and language and variants, and it's just so simplistic. It's just a fancy way of working.
Yeah,
to get things done.
That's what I thought too. You just cherry pick the best of everything you need to meet the needs of the situation for that team or organization. But then I started, Giles, your flashing that tube map got me questioning, wait, am I using that word improperly? Is agnostic agile actually another methodology?
Yes.
Or, is it just how you describe?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I think actually it should probably sit somewhere on that map. I don't think somehow, even if we go really back to the basics and we even go to the Agile Agnostic website and look at it, I just genuinely don't think that that is actually something which is kind of, if I drew a line around the whole outside, I don't know, the M25, because that's sort of around the outside of the tube map. I just don't believe that that's true. I actually just think your organization working in better, smarter ways, removing friction, removing silos, removing waste in process, delivering things, those successful business outcomes the best way possible is probably the ring around the outside. I think that's more encompassing than simply just agnostic agile.
Yeah. I mean, we as practitioners, Femi, I completely agree with you that we as practitioners, we're even getting fed up with people commercializing, commoditizing all these different brands. But is there a movement, like an underground movement in the agile space for us to say, enough here, let's come together, guys, and actually sort this stuff out,
Yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, please do, because I've got a response to that as well.
Yeah.
But Femi, please do.
Mine's going to be very simple. All you need to do is get on LinkedIn and just scroll through how agile practitioners are tearing one another to pieces and just creating war. It's like a war zone with just different interpretations of things. How dare you disagree with me, Ashley? Who are you? When did you start agile? I've been doing agile for 50 years. And that's the kind of vitriol that's out there. We are not united. We cannot even agree on the simplest of things. And then when we go into enterprises and then they ask you one question and they ask Matthew another question, or the same question, and you get totally different answers, they're confused. And then sometimes they hire both of them and you get in there and you create more havoc.
Yeah,
and then you leave.
I've actually really seen that I've actually been in a position where I've advised one thing to a team, and then another coach has literally come around and trumped exactly what I've said and gone, no, she doesn't know what she's doing. I was just like, oh my God, my team are like, they've done really well. So it's really interesting what you're asking here, Ashley, as well. And I think that as long as you're staying true to how you think Agile should be and how it benefits and supports the people that you're working with, you're doing it right. If there's a response, if there's an outcome and there's an impact to that outcome and it's a positive one, I think something right is happening. So I think that would be my take on it.
I think that's true. Rohit, I got your hand, so I'll come to you afterwards. Again, Femi, think cut from the very same tree. It is absolutely kind of near enough pervasive, this sort of, sometimes this nastiness that can be sort of seen, this undertone that can be seen on LinkedIn, and perceptions as well. I've had people who perceive me as being non-agile in the same way as agile. Again, Femi and I only had a conversation about that recently, about someone who's crossed both of our paths. And yet, it's just crazily weird and crazily wrong. So, I think it's communities like ours, right? Communities like the Agilistas, community like what we have now, together, these events where we can all come and learn from one another. Listen to Marcos, listen to Femi, listen to Matthew, listen to yourself, Ash, right? Learn from you all about the experiences you've had, the successes, the failures, exactly what I've just done with my 9 dysfunctions. We could all actually just take it all in turn for 52 weeks of the year, have a meetup where everybody just comes along and shares their top trump dysfunctions as well every single week. No doubt we would probably see lots of recurring patterns week after week after week after week, and we'll all be able to go, I got your number 5 and your number. It'll be like bingo. We could start building a sort of a bingo game. But you know, I think it's about being part of this community. I want to get the results from this research that I'm doing across 2020. I want to get that paper out at some point next year. I want to learn and discover what are the top 10 things done by geographical location, done by size of organization, done by role within the organization, cut all of the results in many different ways. Genuinely, for us then to sort of have this top 10 countdown list of the things which all of us seem to actually be suffering. And then it's a case of, to answer Ash's point, finding workshops, finding practices, finding communities, finding how we all can come together as a single voice to actually champion fixing whatever that dysfunction actually is, and moving forward together, knowing that we've got everybody here, regardless of where we are in the world, people from America, people from the Far East, people from Europe, right, supporting us on actually wanting to overcome and solve the same frictional problem. I think doing that is just going to be absolutely amazing, but we've got to do it as a community, and it's community like this which actually matter the most.
Totally agree. So should we have one more?
Rohit's got his hand up, and I know Matthew has as well, but Rohit had his little blue hand.
Yeah, that's cool.
So.
Yeah, so thank you guys. So yeah, I think for me, I know that we talk a lot about frameworks. I think being agile is about those principles, right? Is customer part of our everyday thing? Is we getting a feedback early? Are we supporting the teams? This is the same. This never change. I think the problem lies is there are so many frameworks. Everyone says, yeah, this is right. This is my one's good. Your one's wrong. You know, that's the problem. If we just focus on agile values and principles, that's it. It should come from top to bottom, bottom to top. That's the main thing. Everything else is second place. Right? We should be focusing on those values. Are we supporting the teams? Right? Are we measuring working software or working product in case like it has to change? Rather than software, we should just talk about products or solutions or something like this, right? So it's all about just those values and principles. Nothing else. Everything else is second place. Doesn't matter what we use. We can create our own framework depending on what the team needs or how the team is working. You know, they might not need Scrum. They don't need Kanban. They might need something else, like Spotify did. Right?
Yeah,
it's all about
definitely.
It's all about mindset and philosophy. Yeah, I think Giles left. Yeah, I think he just lost the connection. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he'll be
there
back.
you go. He's
Yeah,
he's on the phone. Yeah, he's on the phone. Yeah.
Absolutely, Rohit. I think you've made a really valuable point here. At the end of the day, it is about the outcomes and the journey to those outcomes, which kind of goes back to Giles's first dysfunction when he was talking about Agile, where there were no labels. Like Apple, Google, and Microsoft, they don't label or say that they're Agile. They just do them, you know. And I thought that was really interesting, that their main focus is their customer and the outcomes that they achieve as well. And they're pretty powerful outcomes if they do it right.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we are at 8 o'clock. Sorry, did someone want to say something?
No, I'm just trying to get everything. I'm back on 4G now, so honestly, especially after full BT outages the other day. Aaron, I know you've got your hand up as well, and I am interested, especially as a regular member of the community, just to sort of if there's a question, to see if we can help.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and once again, thank you so much for having this forum, and and thank you all for making this available to everybody. The thing that I always find that's easy to forget is that we're always doing this in servant of something else. We're not doing it for the sake of it. You know, we're doing this to either improve the relationship and the flow of value to the customer, or to the mission, or to the citizen, if it's a public, you know, or a nonprofit endeavor. You know, it's all about this larger path to value, whatever value is, and the impact of that value, not just generating it, but the impact of it. And one of the tests I've always used is, how long in a meeting or in a presentation or whatever does someone go without mentioning that, and without sort of allowing the gravitational physics back to that. And I've always sort of not cared about the method, but more about the attitude around that. Because if you can get your attitude around whatever that mission or goal or objective is, and then you can make everything about delivering the most value to that, and making sure it has impact according to that objective that's been agreed upon, then it really doesn't matter what you do. And then I call it sort of yoga industry, because I have friends from the yoga and human performance industry, and this industry just trails that by about 8 years. But it's basically the same. And look, and that's me making fun of it, but it's also at a practical level. Performance is hard, and it always has been hard. It's hard when athletes do it. It's hard when you know, professionals do it. It's hard when organizations do it. And so everybody's always grabbing at something and trying something. And I think that's one of the powerful things about this, even if there's 79 different approaches, is that the experimentation life cycle is what's you know, important. And to do a complete sidebar, to pay homage to Diego Armando Maradona, who was the essence of experimentation and was the ultimate agilista. You know, I feel like that mentality is the benefit that you have here. And I really appreciate everybody putting, you know, this together for that reason. So I know it's long-winded, sorry about that, but I do that. So.
No, thank
Brilliant.
you. Thanks, Aaron. That was brilliant, really insightful. Giles, we've got an echo coming through from you.
Hopefully that stops it. Oh no.
Down a little rabbit hole here somewhere.
It fits the supreme being echoing out into space sort of domination. That's okay.
Hopefully that works now, and hopefully with connections back slowly. It's not, I don't know if I've still got enough bandwidth yet for video. I'm waiting to find out, but we're back. I love this. Big British Telecom. Now, of course, Aaron, you are talking to a lot of people in, and now is obviously, I know we're in the UK, but you're talking to a lot of people who are obviously in England.
Yes,
And so, of course, Diego Maradona with the hand of God moment is the one who upset a lot of us in 1980, whenever it was.
1986. But you can't forget that phenomenal defending in the second goal. And so when you look at being agile.
True, very true.
You know?
But still.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, may he rest in peace.
Exactly.
Guys, I have to wrap up. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and a huge thank you to Giles for such an insightful session today. Big round of applause. I have put the links in the chat room, so we now have a YouTube channel where you can catch up on all of our talks. We also have a new Slack channel that we encourage everyone to join and take part in. If you ever want to share your Agile woes or your Agile successes, please do so in our Agilista Slack channel. And then there's also, there's 2 links to our sponsors, Agile World and Expertise Recruitment, both of which want to kind of really leverage the right type of Agile workers and consultants and coaches and people, and really put people in the right world. And yeah, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you on the next one, which is on the 10th of December.
Yep.
and that will be episode 3 of The Resistance. So myself, Giles, Munway, and JF will be talking about solutions to agile resistance, or, you know, and it's a bit of a Christmas theme as well. So really hope you guys can make it to that. And hopefully I'll see you then.
And Aaron, there we will be able to actually have the emperor chairs and other things as well to actually make good of the there we go, of the echo and the and the challenges. So look, thank you very much, everybody. Apologies for dropping off for 2 seconds there. Thank you as ever for being an awesome community. We couldn't do it without you. All right, simple as that. So we'll see you very soon.
Everyone stay safe. Everyone stay safe.
Thanks.
You too.
Likewise.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.